Good morning. I always look forward to Elevate because we get to share with you what we've been working so hard on in the past year, as well as our plans for the coming year. And it's also a great time to get various community presenters and MVPs together to impart their knowledge about Appian products. So today's keynote, what I'd like to focus on is the security. And the reason I chose this topic for this year's keynote is the first PowerBuilder and PowerServer 22, the latest versions, have really pushed the envelope forward on security. And also, we're increasingly seeing that our customers are concerned and focused on security. Now, I'd like to share with you some statistics from Gartner. This is a survey done in 2021 of CIOs of larger companies, and about 64% of them are allowed to work from home, at least for a portion of time. Now, I'm sure these numbers are inflated by COVID, and if you do the survey again, today it's going to be lower now that COVID is relatively under control in the US. But nonetheless, the trend towards remote work or flexible hybrid work schedule, that's something that has started years ago and has been enabled by technology. Employers focus to basically increase employee satisfaction, attract better talent. So this is something that is not temporary or transitionary because of COVID. This trend is going to be over time. And one thing to keep in mind is even if you have a small number of employees working remotely, even for just a small period of time, that creates a risk. And there needs to be a new set of policies and new set of tools to help mitigate the risks that now that you have this, remote situation. So I'd like to talk about what are common ways that somebody trying to breach your data or wreak havoc on your IT systems. What are the common ways they're going to try to breach you? So one is obviously phishing. You've received emails like this all the time, trying to get you to enter your credit card into Netflix and so on. Another is malware, so that you obviously know how it's imperative to have antivirus on your computers and servers. Compromised passwords, that's another common area. Substandard encryption, and finally, not keeping your software patched up to date, So there's constantly holes in software and we're constantly trying to patch them. It doesn't matter whether it's Appian or it's Microsoft or Oracle, you constantly see patches and updates coming out. So it's important to stay up to date with that. To secure your system. So what I'm going to focus on in today's keynote is really on these last three, because these are the three that really tie into PowerBuilder as well as features that we've added to the product. So that's what we'll be talking about today. So regarding passwords, this is research from Digital Shadows. There's roughly 15 billion passwords circulating in cyber criminal marketplaces like the dark web. So why is that a problem? Well, I don't know about you, but a lot of times, I have a hard time remembering all of these passwords. So you end up using the same password that I used on Netflix. I'm also using on maybe to log into my email or into some system application internally. Now, why I keep bringing up Netflix? In the last week, my account's been hacked 3 times. So I think I got to do a better job with my passwords. So how can you combat this? And sure, you can set password rules and force your employees to change their passwords every 90 days, but they're going to end up probably reusing another password again across multiple sites. You have no way to constantly control that in a reliable way. So the better way to combat this problem is with a stronger authentication of the identity of the user rather than simply relying on passwords. So using either time-based one-time passwords or a certificate. So we call this multi-factor authentication, right? Using that. And then combining that with context-based authentication. So context-based would be, hey, Armin's in San Francisco and he knows the password and he has a cell phone, got the one-time password. All three have to match up. So even I have the one-time password and I know Armin's password, but I'm located in I don't know, in North Korea, then no, you shouldn't be allowed in, right? So that's much stronger way of authenticating, and then there's less pressure on how secure the password is. Now, how can PowerBuilder and Power Server 22 help you remediate this? So no matter you're doing a client server project with PowerBuilder or you're deploying to a cloud native architecture, your PowerBuilder project using the Power Server 22, doesn't matter which project type you do, all of these features are supported universally, which is the HTTP client, the OAuth client. There's support for opaque tokens, JWT tokens. There's a cryptor object that has various encryption algorithms, and decoder object that does various encoding. So using a combination of these things, you can then implement multi-factor authentication rather than simply doing a username and password in your PowerBuilder applications. And we actually have one of our MVPs, Bruce Armstrong, did a session on this for one of our previous Elevates, and that video is available in case you want to watch it. Now, that's not as complex as these examples I said with context-based authentication, but it still gives you an idea of how to use these various features of PowerBuilder to start doing the multi-factor authentication. So now that we talked about passwords, let's move on to the next potential area, which is encryption. So according to research from IBM, it takes 287 days to contain a data breach that was caused by substandard encryption. So you encrypted it, you just didn't encrypt it strong enough, well enough. So what does that mean, not strong enough, well enough? Well, in practical terms, it means when you're using TLS, you're not using 1.2 or newer. You're like on 1. Or 1.1. These are known not to be secure. And in fact, for example, like some servers or web API services won't even allow you to call them if you're not able to use TLS 1.2 at least. So the other would be using like a weak encryption algorithm. There's many different encryption algorithms out there, and a few example of weak encryption algorithms are DES, MD5, or Blowfish. So these aren't things you'd want to use. Or even with a stronger encryption, if you're not using, you didn't set a sufficient key length, that could be a problem. So these are things that you would want to avoid. So how can you deal with weak encryption? Well, encrypt your sensitive data with stronger or the strongest encryption possible. So with PowerBuilder and Power Server 22, no matter which way you're deploying your apps, even traditional client server, we have added support for TLS 1.3. We now support two-way SSL. So traditionally, the SSL is just a one-way handshake. This is a two-way handshake. Well, the server verifies the client verifies the server. So that's now supported much stronger way of doing the SSL. And also you have the cryptor object, which is going to allow you to do asymmetric and symmetric encryption, supporting various strong encryption algorithms. Now, patching, that was another one we talked about. Important to keep your software up to date. I know as developers, we're always scared to apply updates. It's going to break things. It takes time to test it. But from a security standpoint, that's why hackers go after this, because they know systems are not always up to date. And even if they are, there's generally a lag. So as soon as a vulnerability becomes known and people haven't updated, that's your window in. The longer you leave that window for the hacker, the more likely you're going to get breached. So up to 60% of data breaches arise from CVEs. So these are common vulnerability and exposures. You've a lot of times seen CVE notices for OpenSSL or for Log4j or so on. So these CVEs are something to pay attention to, and generally a vendor will address that by issuing a maintenance release or a patch or something, an update, and it's resolved in the future updates. So that's the reason you want to up to date. Now, the CISA, Cyber Information Security Agency, they've compiled a list of the top exploited CVEs that were exploited the most. And guess which softwares won the prizes? The top 5 were the Windows 7, 8, and Server 2016, the .NET Framework 2.0 to 4.7, Office 2007 to 2016, and SharePoint. And I bet you most of you are using all of these things, or at least many of the things on this list. So that is scary. So how can you remediate that with PowerBuilder and PowerServer 22? Well, PowerBuilder and PowerServer 22 supports not only Windows 10, but supports Windows 11. And we've discontinued Windows 7, so that's not even supported anymore. We also support the latest Windows Server 22. All of the .NET features of PowerBuilder. So let's say you're creating a web service with PowerBuilder, or you're using PowerServer to deploy your app over the internet with a cloud native architecture. Those are all the .NET features of PowerBuilder. And so with the 22 version, we've now upgraded to the latest .NET 6. And you'll notice that .NET 6 and .NET 5 are not on the top vulnerability list. So that's a great way to patch things up. It also supports the latest versions of databases you may be using, latest SQL Server, latest Oracle. And if you're not on the latest versions, besides upgrading your PowerBuilder Power Server, you definitely want to start to move your systems forward. That can help, with the security. So I want to talk about attack surface. The larger your surface, the more chances or potentials there is for hackers to get in. And unfortunately, with the way the world has evolved with the internet, remote access, you might have to integrate with your suppliers, maybe you're even giving your customers access. This external remote access is expanding the surface that hackers can get in. And a perimeter strategy, that's what we've used in the 80s and 90s. That model is no longer effective. The idea behind a perimeter strategy was, once your employees are authenticated, then, I trust my employees, so they can just roam around free behind the firewall. Well, it's not that your employees are not trustworthy, but what if their device has been compromised? Or what if that person is not your employee? We were talking about misuse of credentials, right? Someone has used my username and password is not really Armin coming in. So it is very, very dangerous to have this perimeter strategy mentality. That's no longer effective. And client server is an architecture that was basically kind of built on this perimeter strategy. That was the whole mentality. It was on premise inside your company and not intended for external access. So the user's device has direct access to your database. And the data is really what usually people are after, either that just for fun, trying to disrupt your system and operations. But normally what's of value, financial value, is the data. So that's what they're after. Now, how can you combat this? Well, getting away from this perimeter strategy mentality, obviously, but specifically one practical thing you can do is what we call network segmentation, or, and there's different variations of this. You can do micro network segmentation and so on. But at a high level is basically, creating a lot of different barriers and segments so that even if like your employee's device is compromised, it's limited what that device is going to be able to do. It doesn't have full access to all your database servers and all your web servers and every other computer on the network. Then that compromised device could really access everything and wreak havoc. So how can you remediate? My recommendation is to consider transitioning from a client server architecture to a cloud native architecture. And that's one of the reasons why we take PowerServer very seriously, doing a lot of investment in that. It's going to allow you to take your existing client server project, and it has a cloud native compiler that's going to recompile that project with very minimal code change as a cloud native app. So let's talk about this cloud native architecture and how network segmentation looks. So you're going to have your existing database, which you're reusing. You don't have to make any changes there. But what PowerServer compiler is going to do is generate this data access logic layer for you. It's 100% C# running on .NET Core, supporting the latest .NET long-term support version, which is .NET 6. And so all of your data accesses happen in this layer. So that's what talks to database, not the web server, not the user. It's this web API layer that has the data access logic, basically all of your SQL. Now, Then in front of that, what you're going to have is typically like a reverse web proxy. It's going to be a web server receiving the web API requests. And you can typically, with .NET 6, you'd be running Kestrel as your web API layer. And on the web server, you can pretty much put anything, any kind of HTTP server in front of it. Common choices are obviously Microsoft IS or Apache or Nginx. So what's talking to the web APIs is not directly the end user either. It's really the web servers is there doing the talking and making that connection. And so the user is going to download from the web server your PowerBuilder app URL. Does not require any administrator rights. That's something we really focused on to make sure that you don't have to lower the security on your user's device. Now, we go further than traditional client-server compile. So with Power Server, what we do is we actually encrypt your PBDs using AES encryption. And when the user clicks your app to try to run it, it's going to perform an integrity check to verify the integrity of that app, making sure none of these files have been tampered with or switched out or hijacked or anything like that. Assuming it passes the integrity check, then it'll allow the app to start executing, loading the PBDs into the memory. And there's going to be no SQL in this app. So even though in PowerBuilder, you might have in that window wrote embedded SQL and your data windows have SQL behind it, right? And you've put that in your window object, for example. Even though that's how you designed an IDE, the compiler is taking care of compiling this as an end tier. So every time the PowerBuilder app needs to get its data, what it's going to do is do a REST API call to the web server, over HTTP, and request the data. And assuming that they pass the authentication, which is up to you to implement, the way Power Server is designed, you can code that any way you want. OAuth is supported, JWT is supported. You can use Okta or other, there's third-party identity platforms. You can use Azure Active Directory. So no matter what you want to do, you can implement the authentication the way you want. And once the user is authenticated, there'll be a token, and that token gets passed on every web API request to make sure that that user is authenticated to access that web API. And then the web API will be actually executing the SQL, getting the data, packaging as a JSON, bringing that JSON back to the user. The data window will automatically parse the JSON, display that data. So that's how all of this works. And you can see the user no longer has a direct connection to your database. And what's being passed to gain access on each request is a token on every single request. Every time one's data, it's basically re-authenticating. And so much more secure than a typical client-server architecture. Now, even if you're deploying on-premise, or let's say you're using some type of remote desktop technology like Citrix. So even in those situations, still allowing that user's device to have a direct connection database is not really secure or not a best practice. So this architecture, even if you don't need external access, could still help bolster your security. So I talked a lot about what are things you can do and how some new features of PowerBuilder can help you boost your security. Now what I want to do is change gears and talk about what Appion's doing to help make our products more secure and help you achieve your security goals. So the first thing is, if you're in terms of our license management systems and those things, if you as an Appian customer, you go to appian.com to do that. And so we have constant security monitoring on our servers, and you can at any time in real time go to tinyurl.com/Appian security and see the score of how good of a job we're doing on keeping our servers secure. The other thing is, on various Appian products, you perform a security code scan. So this is something that scans the source code our developers wrote to look for, common types of security issues to help strengthen the robustness of the code that our engineers write. Now, in addition to security code scan, we obviously do peer reviews and the other SDLC best practices. But you don't want to only rely on human beings. These tools are very useful, especially when you're dealing with large amount of code that Appian generates every single year. The other thing is our products, like many products that are out there, are going to have some third-party dependencies. And we're constantly prioritizing now to keep those third-party dependencies up to date. Because, at the end of the day, you could have your systems up to date, but if PowerBuilder's third-party dependencies and they're not up to date, that could be a potential area of risk. So that's something we take very seriously, very committed to, starting from 22 and going forward. And the other is for the .NET features in PowerBuilder Power Server 22, we've moved away from how things were in the old days of Sybase and so on. Now everything we do in .NET is 100% managed code, so that you're not directly interfacing with the OS. Everything is memory management and all that's all handled by the .NET framework. Another area is we really focus our R&D on constantly and continuously supporting the latest security standards. So, Windows 10 is still not providing very straightforward, robust TLS 1.3 support. Windows 11 does. PowerBuilder 22 already is doing that for TLS 1.3. Power Server 22 is already doing that. Or as another example, we've added 2-way SSL. I don't think any customers are strongly demanding that, but we went ahead and did that anyways. There's certain things that we're not only going to just wait and rely on customers to tell us, we're going to do what we think is right. The other is we talked about how we've changed how PBDs are handled. Now, that file encryption, that integrity check, that's applying not only to Power Server. If you decide you are going to stay to client-server architecture, we have a new feature called Power Client. And that's still a client-server app, but it's using these security features on the client side that I talked about, the encryption and integrity check. And the other thing that we're doing, both for Power Server and Power Client projects, is that we automatically encrypt database passwords. So, if in your PowerScript code you've written a password, or in Power Server you need to provide a password, for the database, those passwords are encrypted, as well as all of the embedded SQL that you've written, we encrypt that. Now, in traditional client servers, not, but if you do client server using the Power Client packaging option, it's going to go through all of that SQL and encrypt it inside your app, so that even if somehow that user's device was compromised, no one would be able to see your SQL. So I'm going to switch gears now and do a demo of some of these things. So here we're looking at, this is the Power Server. I'm using a version that has a visual dialogue so you can kind of see what's going on, give you a sneak peek. But basically, this is Kestrel, .NET 6, and it's running the Power Server web APIs that are generated by the compile process custom to your application that represents, your data windows and so on, and embedded SQL. And what we have is on the user's machine is a shortcut that references the exe. And that's gonna, when you click this, you're gonna see that, let me go ahead and do that right now. When you click this, you're gonna see a scanning. That scanning was to check the integrity of the app, as well as check if there's a updated version of the app on the web server. If it is, to download that. So let me go ahead and move this over to the side. So this is the user's machine with the PowerBuilder app. This is the dialog box is a server. Now you can see every time when we go ahead and open a window and load data windows, do data retrieval, it's the server is executing the SQL, and what's coming back is the JSON data. The user's machine is not directly communicating database, it's communicating to the APIs. Now, the other thing to look at the client app is it gets cached in the roaming folder by default. As a developer, you could change where that goes. But we go ahead and take a look. You don't have the traditional PBDs that you get with client server. Instead, it's a folder. And when we go ahead and look in one of these folders, you're going to see that every single object, no matter it's data window, user object window, is their own individual files. So this is not for security purpose. We do this so that we can easily, incrementally update. If you've modified one window and the rest of the app hasn't changed, there's no reason to update the whole app. We can just individually update, for example, w_address. But what I want to show you, the reason I went here is to show you the encryption. So with PowerBuilder P code, bytecode, any bytecode, doesn't matter, Java, .NET, PowerScript, bytecode can easily be decompiled, and then they can see your source code. They can see your embedded SQL. They can see the password you wrote. So with what the AES encryption would do, if you go ahead and if I open this up in, for example, Notepad, you can see that it's encrypted. And if you try to decrypt this, it's going to be hard. AES is relatively strong encryption. And we chose an encryption to balance the strength as well as performance because we have to consider both. But, you know, it should definitely be better than the current situation. Now, the other thing I want to do is go ahead and take a look at the Web API project. So as I mentioned, a compile process is going to generate a .NET Core Web API project. It's all C#. I've opened it up in Snap Develop, which is the free C# IDE that's included with PowerBuilder. And if we go ahead and look here, you're going to see under the project, we have our app models project. If we expand the ESQL, you're going to see that your embedded SQL is here. So it's no longer in the PBDs in the client app. With a Power Server project, it's going to be on the server behind your firewall. So all of the embedded SQLs are going to be there. Now, this is a simple demo app, so there's not a ton of embedded SQL, but it shows you the idea. Also, all of your data windows. So if we go ahead and take a look at, for example, d_address, your data windows, the data object is here. So what's on the user's machine is a definition of the visual portion of the data window, not the data object itself. That is deployed and parsed to the server executing in .NET. So here you can see the SQL that's behind, the data window. Okay. And then the other thing we'll take a look at is the database connection string, right? Because the client doesn't make the connection, the Web API does. So if we take a look at the connection string, here you can see I'm using, in this case, SQL Anywhere as this demo database and the user ID. But the password, you can see that's not what we typed. This was encrypted by the process. So definitely much more secure. All right, now that you've seen a brief demo of Power Server, I'd like to close it off by reminding you can connect with us on the community.appian.com site. That's a great resource where you can do tech Q&A, not just with Appian staff, but various other people in the community, as well as MVPs that can share their knowledge with you. There's a bunch of great tech articles, tech videos. We have online training course for PowerBuilder if you're trying to get a new Power developer up to speed to help join your team. A lot of great technical resources. All of them are free on the community.appian.com site. To stay updated with news about Appian, you can subscribe to our emails, or if you don't like receiving emails, you could follow us on Twitter, YouTube. We have an Appian channel that's going to have a recording of the keynote as well as the various Elevate Tech sessions, and we also update it with other educational content from time to time. So if you're not already subscribed to our YouTube channel, we definitely recommend you do so. So really appreciate all of you coming out to join us for Elevate. We got a lot more interesting stuff planned for you later on today as well. So please do stick around, and hope you enjoy Elevate 2022.
Dear attendees, it's my great pleasure to meet you online again. As the PowerBuilder product manager, today I will present you a report on the status and the plan for the future development of PowerBuilder. Before we begin, let's quickly run through a disclaimer. The plans we presented are our goals for the product based on our best judgment and information available at this particular moment. Since nobody can be certain what the future holds, it's possible that we will need to adjust our plan. So please do not rely on the information to make important decisions. Highlights of the past year. Our team's goal each year is to be confident that PowerBuilder is heading in the right direction. That is, while maintaining PowerBuilder product to keep existing projects running reliably, we strive to keep modernizing it to stay relevant in the current app development ecosystem. Since the last Elevate, we have already released the features in the following major areas. Continuous focus on what is important to most customers. Stability, security, compatibility, and app features are the most important. All of these factors are vital for PowerBuilder projects to serve the core needs of a business. Steady improvements to the IDE. While there is a lot left to do to revamp the IDE, we have taken a first step by enabling tabbed view for the editor and improving code searching and jumping. Major step forward in PowerServer deployments. Deploying an existing PowerBuilder project to the cloud is now totally automatic. Well, very close. And when we integrated it in PowerBuilder, we considered how to virtually eliminate any learning curve. The result is many customers can convert in a matter of weeks. Version 2022, the best version ever. I have heard from a number of customers that version 2022 is the best version ever. Our team really appreciates such encouragement from our customers, and it fuels us to work even harder to keep pushing PowerBuilder forward. But 2022 doesn't deserve all the credit. The work on many of the great changes in 2022 started as far back as 2019 R3. It takes a number of engineering cycles and real-world feedback from customers until we arrive at a truly great feature. Here are several examples of this evolution. In version 2019 R3, we provided the Power Client deployment capability. In version 2021, we added PowerServer deployment. And in version 2022, the team refactored the configuration, the deployment process, the Cloud App Launcher, and brought various enhancements for making this solution perform better. In version 2019 R3, the PowerBuilder IDE and runtime were decoupled. Based on this change, we added the x64 option to the IDE. So now it becomes possible to run and debug 64-bit applications directly in the IDE. Without decoupling the runtime from the IDE, this wouldn't be possible. In version 2021, a new standalone compiler, PB Auto Build, was added for automatically build and deploy 3 project types: client server projects, Power Server projects, and Power Client projects. We then actively monitored people's usage of this feature and enhanced it diligently to make a more productive feature in version 2022. There are more examples. So the key point I want you to take away is have realistic expectations about a new feature in its initial release. And if a new feature is important to you, a good iteration of that is only possible if you take the initiative to test it out and give us feedback. Product release cycles. Ever since Appian took over PowerBuilder, we have seen version 2017 and its revisions, version 2019 and its revisions, version 2021, and most recently, version 2022. There has been at least a new release every year. We are committed to PowerBuilder, so we plan to continue this trend. In 2023, we will release 2022 R2. It is possible this would be an LTS version, and if so, there would not be any further revisions. Instead, what will follow R2 is the next major version, and most likely in second half of 2024. We hope most of you upgrade to version 2022, so that your projects are ready to quickly make the jump to R2 when it is available, especially if it will be an LTS version. Roadmap focus. For years, we have stressed 4 roadmap focus areas: core features, dev productivity, modern UI, and cloud. We have done a lot of work around these 4 focus areas, and some focus areas, such as cloud, are quite advanced now. That's why we decided to reprioritize our focus for the short-term and mid-term roadmap. Short-term means the coming 1 to 2 years. Mid-term means 3 to 5 years. For the short term, the focus is enhancing UI/UX. There is much work to do about the UI/UX. Business users expect further modernization of the applications. They judge based on what they see, and they care about meaning and relevant experiences too. For every change we make to the product and every feature we add, we must make sure we are doing the right things, follow the modern minimalist design, and deliver high-quality results. For the midterm, the focus is enhancing dev productivity. We really appreciate how patient PowerBuilder developers have been while we first took care of high priorities that affected the PB runtime. Now, the engineering team has gradually put more emphasis on modernizing the IDE. Since the required work is comparatively large, the bigger result will start to really take shape in the next major release. Stay compatible and stable. No matter what we do for the product, our utmost responsibility is to make sure it stays compatible and stable. As specified in our internal product requirements document, the product must support all non-EOL versions that are GA'd before release of this new version, specifically for Windows Desktop OS, Windows Server OS, and the supported databases such as SQL Server, Oracle, and SQL Anywhere. Regarding the database support, besides continuing to support the native drivers, our team plans to add .NET 6 driver support for the supported databases. Our internal benchmarks show that data window performance improves substantially when using the .NET 6 drivers. Also, .NET drivers are more secure. For example, C# is more memory safe, and it gives our customers more options to choose what's best for their project. The security requirements are essential to the development of PowerBuilder as a product, and also essential to the development of the applications that will be deployed to various challenging environments. Therefore, we are catering to the two aspects when keeping up with the latest security requirements: the code security of the product and the security protocols to support for the runtime applications. Runtime features. Let's first take a look at the runtime features we plan to add in the short term. Modern UI features include graph enhancements, tabbed windows, and Web View 2. You need not make any code changes. The graphs will immediately look better in your application because the engineers have used anti-aliasing techniques and applied modern fonts and lines directly to the graphs. The graphs finally have a fresher look. Tabbed windows have become popular in today's applications and systems. We have added tabbed windows for the IDE, and we think it's valuable to introduce it to runtime applications as well. With the tabbed windows, the MDI windows can be instantly transformed into dynamic tabbed windows through a single setting. The web browser control has been well accepted. At the time we started to implement the web browser, Microsoft had not yet introduced Web View 2, so we went with Chromium. Now that Web View 2 has been released and our testing indicates it works well, we plan to switch to it. There are a number of benefits of Web View 2, including it's already integrated into the Windows OS and can be updated independently of PowerBuilder. Per the requests connected, We are also adding new objects, controls, events, and functions. The SMTP object is a native email client object that has no external dependency on other client software, such as Outlook. The PDF Builder has taken the PDF functionality of PowerBuilder to a more advanced level, such as merging PDFs from rich text edit and data window or external documents or images, adding watermark, adding security, adding TOC, and also providing attachment management. The other event will be enhanced to provide a custom event ID. When this option is enabled, it is possible to utilize new Windows event message IDs. This way, the supported Windows events won't be limited to the predefined PBM events list. We have discontinued support for the init object out of security concerns of its HTTP mechanism not supporting TLS 1.2 or 1.3. Now that we have HTTP client, web browser control, etc., the only useful feature of init object is hyperlink to URL. So our team plans to implement a hyperlink to URL that is secure as the replacement of this function in the init. Data windows are key to PowerBuilder, and we thought one great way to enhance UX would be DDDW DDLB filter feature. As for RTE enhancements, you may note that this year, Appian has further expanded partnership with text control in order to give PowerBuilder users access to enterprise edition of their product. This opens more possibility for our team to add more features for the RTE. As for the runtime features to add in the middle term, we plan to bring more modern controls and layout to PowerBuilder applications. The navigation panel is a popular control nowadays, used for navigation in all kinds of applications. The layout splitter has movable bars that divide a display area, for example, a window or a user object, into multiple auto-resizable panels. Both of these controls will make it convenient for users to view and access the content in the application. One of the major challenges for an application UI to be modern is being DPI aware and scaling its UI elements on bigger screens. Our engineering team has figured out how to leverage the existing resize event for auto-adjusting. But some projects will further benefit if we add native support for this feature, which we plan to do in the middle term. Our team is keen on monitoring the adoption of features after introducing them to the market. There has been a lot of interest in the ribbon bar, but a significant number of customers have not actually implemented it successfully. We understand it's not easy to apply it to an existing complex application, so our team plans to further simplify applying the ribbon bar to existing applications. Lastly, we plan to add the Save as Excel feature for directly saving the formatting of a data window along with its data, of course, to Excel. This has been on our roadmap for a long time. We are finally getting to it. I always hate to remove anything from our roadmap, but we have to constantly weigh engineering efforts of not just adding but maintaining features for the long run against the demand and other priorities we have. It seems to us it's not so critical for most customers that PowerBuilder has built-in FTP client or QR code generator. So at least for now, we're dropping these features from our roadmap. IDE features. We will keep adding more IDE features and improving it to enhance the dev productivity. In the short term, we plan to get rid of the dependency on the legacy .NET framework. .NET Core has replaced the legacy .NET framework, and we must upgrade to .NET 6 so PowerBuilder can take better advantage of the .NET ecosystem. Update the Migration Assistant. We shall update the Migration Assistant so it can detect features that have been recently obsolete or discontinued, and give users proper suggestions to remediate their code. This will make it easier to upgrade to newer version of PowerBuilder. Source control is one of the most used features by PowerBuilder developers, which is why we have been enhancing the source control functionality in almost every version. In fact, we are still continuing to enhance it in the future. For example, enabling the source control capability in the library pattern. In the middle term, we plan to revamp the IDE in the following ways. A modern code editor. The editor will be a brand new one with the typical modern coding techniques, such as collapsible code blocks, code assistance, code navigation, code refactoring, etc. In addition, we plan to introduce 2D flattened layout into the IDE, and also provide theme options so that you can customize it to your liking. It is already possible to run and debug 64-bit applications directly in the IDE. The next step, we will support directly calling 64-bit DB drivers, OCX, DLLs in the IDE painters, which will be more convenient for the application development. Also, we will try to enhance the debugging experience. For example, continuously improving the 64-bit debugger and showing data store data in debugging sessions. PowerServer deployment. Enhancing the PowerServer deployment option still remains a key focus for us because we see so many customers deploying their PowerBuilder apps to remote users with band-aids like remote desktop, which have poor scalability, less secure than cloud-native architecture, and high licensing and operating costs. In the short term, we will handle the miscellaneous features requested by customers who have already purchased PowerServer, such as further optimizing the compilation and deployment process. The PowerServer deployment process is much more complex than client-server applications. We will do more work to make the whole process more intuitive and easier to follow. There are only a handful of unsupported features by PowerServer projects. However, there is one that causes major rewriting difficulty, SQL Preview. Our engineers are now trying to figure out a way to handle SQL Preview, so it will require less rewriting. We will support DB2 connectivity in PowerServer. The runtime applications will support loading images in a picture control or data window via URLs. In the middle term, our plan is to provide auxiliary tools that will help analyzing and managing PowerServer projects. Specifically, a backend management console that can assist the PowerServer administrators to view and manage the transactions and sessions, etc. A performance analyzer that can monitor and point out the operations in an application that have performance issues. And the PowerServer request debugger, which can track each request sent to the PowerServer and the result sent back. We are still actively collecting customers' feedbacks and requirements for PowerServer, so our customers can be free of band-aid approaches. Annual survey results. Last month, we conducted a survey collecting feedback about PowerBuilder. Let me share with you some interesting statistics that caught my eye. What is the version of PowerBuilder you are currently using? The largest percentages go to 2019 R3 LTS, 2021, and 2022. It's great to see so many customers are upgrading to the latest PowerBuilder releases at a faster pace. How would you rate your general satisfaction level with the newest version of PowerBuilder you tried? 76.1% of the respondents are satisfied or very satisfied. Then, we checked further the satisfaction level with the different versions. We see that version 2022 has the highest satisfaction level, and the satisfaction levels of the old Sybase versions are the lowest. We asked what the respondents use PowerBuilder for. 94.5% use it for maintaining existing applications, and 50.7% use it for developing new applications. 14.3% are deploying applications with PowerServer. It's great to see so many of our customers are building new apps with PowerBuilder. How frequently do you upgrade your applications? The respondents are relatively evenly distributed across the options, upgrading at every MR release, at every long-term support version release, every major release, or every 2 or 3 major releases. This statistics highlights that customers are really able to use PowerBuilder at every stage of our product development cycle. How long does it usually take to upgrade your largest application? I'm really happy to see that more than half of the respondents can upgrade their largest applications in less than half a year. That means customers can keep up with our agile release cycles for PowerBuilder, and their projects can quickly benefit from the improvements we are bringing to PowerBuilder. The most liked features are more runtime features, revamped IDE, and PowerServer deployment enhancements. This matches quite well with our focus areas for the roadmap, both in terms of features we already have added to PowerBuilder and what is coming in the short and middle term. Okay, that's a lot of information, and I really appreciate your interest in the future of PowerBuilder. Last but not least, please stay connected with us after Elevate. You can participate on our community site, community.appian.com, or send emails to product@appian.com. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Chris Pollock. I'm Director of Developer Relations here at Appian. Thanks Julie for that lovely introduction. It's my privilege today to give you a sneak peek of what's coming in PowerBuilder 2022 Revision 2. So let's see what I've been able to actually put together. Lots of graph enhancements, and we'll see that both in some of the graphs that I've captured and a little bit of a demo as well. Sheets as tab windows. A lot of you know, for example, that you can actually have tab painters here in PowerBuilder 2022. Well, what we're saying now is your MDI applications can also display child windows, MDI child windows, as sheets as tab windows as well. Autocomplete has been added to drop-down list box and drop-down data windows. This is really cool. That gives you a lot more interacting with the user interface without any actual additional programming. And the PDF Builder, which was beta in PowerBuilder 2022 GA, has now been moved into a production support role here within PowerBuilder Revision 2. So we'll have a look at what the PDF Builder looks like now in Revision 2. We also have the SMTP client object, which is a new object class, allows your PowerBuilder applications to talk directly to the email server. So you don't have to use the email client that we've been using in the mapping interface. And we've had Library Painter enhancements to be able to interact better with source control. Note at the bottom here that the product roadmap for not only PowerBuilder, but all the Appian products is available at appian.com/developers/roadmap. I encourage you to go here every once in a while because we do update that on a continual basis. So graph enhancements. So the goal here in this release is to improve the look and feel of existing graphs. Because you must admit the graphs were getting a little bit on the older and seasoned side of life. In order to improve that, we've added anti-aliasing in the graphs to minimize distortion. So a lot better, cleaner drawing is what we're saying. We've added more modern fonts and also the ability to draw those fonts in a more refined fashion so you get better text display. And we have refined graph lines that indicate where the values intersect. And more intuitive color selection. And improvements without requiring any use of the UI themes, which is really nice. It just means that as soon as you migrate to this release, your graphs will look better color-wise. However, you do get improved graph display throughout the application and the graphs when you have UI themes enabled as well, as we'll see shortly. So let's look at some of the graph examples. One of the things I could have done, I could have run the demo application, but you really couldn't appreciate the before and after. So what I've done here is I've actually captured on the left-hand side PowerBuilder 2019 and on the right-hand side PowerBuilder 2022 R2. Exactly the same graph, but you can see the differences. On the left-hand side, you can see, for example, the chunky dotted lines as they go horizontally across. Well, you notice how more refined they are here on the right-hand side for R2. Also, you notice here that some of the lines drawn here in this area graph are kind of a little bit sketchy, but on the right-hand side, they're very, very nice and clean. That's where the anti-aliasing comes in. And if you look, of course, at the legend at the bottom, you can see that we don't have a big black line, and the font looks a lot cleaner at this point. And same with the numbers on the vertical axis. So a lot of nice drawing improvements here. So let's have a look here, for example, at a bar graph. Again, 2019 on the left, and you can see R2 on the right. Notice on the red lines on the left that you get that black kind of thick border around the actual bars themselves, where you don't see that on the right-hand side. Again, the lines are much cleaner, the font is much cleaner, and the colors, of course, much more softer, which goes very well when you consider the Windows 10 and the Windows 11 operating system, which are also going to that more muted, subtle coloring effect. Let's have a look at a stacked bar graph. Again, you can see the kind of a thick black border around the yellow there at the top of the stacked graph. And the chunky lines, those are all cleaned up and it looks a lot cleaner on the right-hand side. So let's have a look at a line graph. You can see where the actual values intersect the lines. On the left-hand side, you have some kind of weird symbols that you see here in the line of where it intersects, where it's a lot cleaner and more modern. And again, you don't have that kind of jagged line, that anti-aliasing. It draws the lines much cleaner here in R2. And of course, what we have here is a radar graph. Actually, you can produce that for a long time in PowerBuilder using the pie chart when you have a series activated. So again, on the left-hand side, you can see sort of the jagged lines as it's drawn around the circle. You don't see that on the right-hand side. Again, the colors are cleaner and the text is much cleaner. So existing graphs all around are going to look a lot better. So let's actually look at a quick graph demo just to show you a couple other things. So here you have the PowerBuilder 2022 R2 IDE. And we're actually using here the sales demo application. So I'm going to run this. And we'll have a look here at the statistics within the ribbon bar. And we'll actually look at the modern graphs. So here, for example, I can select the different points on the graph. We're drawing an area graph at this point. And you can see here that we have another nice choice of colors. We'll notice here that at this point in the settings, I'm not using any themes. So you can see here the graph is definitely improved to a much cleaner drawing at this point. What happens, however, if I actually go here to settings and choose, for example, a dark theme? So you can see here in the dark theme that the colors have changed altogether. So again, it's much more, colors have been automatically selected to complement that particular theme. If we go to a different theme, like blue for example, and again here in the blue theme, you can see the colors again are complementing the blue theme that you chose. So again, no programming is required. You just basically activate a theme and your entire application will follow suit, now including the graphs, both in the graph control and the graph data window. So the next feature here is Sheets as tabs. So application sheets, also known as MDI child windows, can now appear as tabbed windows. It provides a simple and improved user interface for the application user. It's implemented via a new MDI frame window property. And it works with or without a presence of a ribbon bar, menu, or menu toolbar on the MDI frame window. So no changes will be required to the OpenSheet command. So in other words, you don't have to reprogram your existing application in order to get this feature. And note, you can still use the standard look and feel of an MDI child window. You don't have to go to this new tabbed interface. So let's look at a demo of the new tabbed window. So coming back to the sales demo application, let's open up a couple of MDI child windows. For example, address, customer, and product, just to give you a sample. And notice that the MDI child window is now open as tabs. So this is now the look and feel that you can give to your business applications as well, very, very simply. Let's have a look at how that's done. So returning to the IDE here, I'm actually going to go here and look at my to-do list. I hope everybody's using this feature. This is the cat's meow when I'm doing work here, because I can create a list of exactly what I need to do. And every day I come back, I can start the IDE, and I can come back to exactly what I want to be having a look at, or changing, or doing some analysis on. In this case, the tabbed window, I just double click it. And you notice here it opens the MDI frame. And we can scroll down here and we see a new property here called built-in DTB. All you need to do is check this new property and you're going to get a tabbed interface. So very, very simple here to do on your MDI frame window, and then your application goes into that tabbed window look and feel. And you'll be able to also modify that under program control. MDI frame dot the name of the property equal to yes or no, and then dynamic turn it on as well. So that's how tabbed windows are going to work. So now I can basically check that I've actually given that information to you here, that in my to-do list. So let's have a look at the new autocomplete feature. So what we've done here is added for the drop-down list box a new edit style feature, autocomplete. We also added this for the drop-down data window edit style feature as well. And you can auto-populate the matching field value according to what's entered in the controls text field. It will automatically filter the matching options according to what's entered in the controls text field. And note, you can still use the drop-down list box or the drop-down data window without this automatic feature. And you can still take low-level control with your own PowerScript code. Many of you over the last couple of decades, for example, have used the edit changed event to actually capture the keystroke by keystroke what the user is entering and then automatically filter that drop-down list. You can still do that if you'd like. But let's see how easy it is when you actually use the new autocomplete feature in this particular demo. So first of all, let's have a look at actually how it's done. So again, if I go to my handy dandy to-do list, you can see here I have autocomplete. And if I double click that, what you're going to see here is a data window coming up, which is really the list of addresses. And you'll notice here that if we go to the actual edit style, you can see here in the properties we have a new autocomplete. So we just turn that on. And we have some choices here in this drop-down list box. There's no autocomplete, which is 0. It means you're back to the way it was in 2019, 2021 of PowerBuilder. You can go into suggest mode, so it means that the drop-down will actually suggest the value, but the user has to key it in. If you go to append mode, then whatever they select automatically goes into the edit control. Or the favorite one here is let me do both of them. Let me suggest and allow you to automatically select and append that value to the edit control. So this is where we're running today in this demo is type 3. So let's run the demo application and see what happens. So going to the address field, for example, let's have a look here at this dropdown. And this is the data window that we just saw there with that particular property turned on. So for example, if I type in MI, you can see here it automatically goes down and narrows the list to, for example, Michigan, Minnesota, Missouri, for example. If I type in S, then it narrows the list. If I back up, it automatically expands the list here as I basically back tap at this point. So it's pretty easy, for example, here to choose something, and you can see here that as soon as you do, the actual selection changed event fires, and then of course we can then re-retrieve the data or filter the main primary data window based on that drop-down data window. Again, no programming required here to make all this happen. It's just going on and turning on a property and then selecting either 1, 2, 3 if you want autocomplete, or 0 if you want to take program controls like we used to do in the older versions of Appian PowerBuilder. So let's have a look now at the PDF Builder. So we've moved here from the beta in the GA release to now to the basically a well-functioned production version in R2. It allows you to import a PDF document into a new PDF document, import data from a single data window child, or data store into an existing PowerBuilder PDF document, merge PDF documents. They could be from a PowerBuilder application, they come from an external application, or a combination thereof. And we can set the PDF document properties and security. In other words, we can basically override what's already there and add more properties and security values that maybe the original PDF generation did not do. And we can customize the PDF content. We can compress the PDF document as well, especially after we've done a merge. And we can insert single pages into an existing PDF document as well. So that wasn't available in the beta release. And we can create jump links in the PDF document as well, which I'll show you, which is another new feature here going into the R2 release that we didn't have in beta. And then add text or image watermarks as well. And if you want, you can attach other external files to your PDF document as well, such as a text file, for example. So the new PDF feature utilizes some new object classes: PDF object, PDF document, PDF attachment, PDF watermark, and all sorts of object classes. As a matter of fact, I took a snapshot of that. And you actually look at that in the object browser, you can see here in the non-visual part of the object browser, you can see here PDF object. If you expand that, you can see there's a new one called PDF model object, which then breaks down into some child objects. We have PDF content, PDF visual object, and they all break down into other object classes. Note, however, and one example here, PDF security down near the bottom. It looks like an object, but it's really a structure. So I just wanted to point that out, that if you go and create your own descendants from the system class, that some of these objects won't appear as a valid option to create a descendant. That's because they're really more of a structure. But for example, the main ones, such as PDF context, PDF model object, PDF document, are proper objects and can be inherited. So just in case there you do go into creating a descendant and you wonder why some of those don't appear, that's why. So let's have a look at the PDF Builder demo within the example application. So returning back here to our sales demo application, we'll run the application again. This time we're going to go into statistics, and we're going to have a look here at two graphs, the category graph and the subcategory graph. And both of those can actually produce a PDF because they're data windows. And we want to have a look and see how that actually happens. So I can actually not only show you the end result, I can actually show you how it's created from the code as well. So let's look at both of those aspects. So I first want to show you that within the sales demo application, we have a subfolder called PDF. Right now it's empty at this point, so there's nothing there. So let's just hang on to that information. What I'll go do here is go back to the category graph, and we'll actually run the report and create the data window and populate it. And now you can actually see the actual values, and you can see the data window graph as well. So here we have a report. We can go to subcategory statistics here, and we'll run this particular data window as well and create another report. And you can see here now the values coming in a bar graph for that particular second report. So what I want to do now is I actually wanted to go and create a PDF, but I want to merge it. So what we're saying here, you can see we're going to merge the PDF documents, the category statistics, and the subcategory statistics. We're going to generate those PDFs. We're going to merge them together, and we're going to actually add images and a watermark here, and we're going to compress this end result as well. So we're doing a lot of work here. So I'm just going to hit the create button here, and we'll have a look and see how that's done. Also, during the create, I'm actually going to go back to the actual subfolder here, PDF subfolder, and see exactly what happens. So there you can see the two graphs were created, the category and the subcategory at this point, and a third one, which is the merge of those two, have been created. So you can see here we get a success at this point that the actual code has been executed, and there's a new PDF has been merged, created called statisticsreport.pdf. So let's go back here and double click it and see exactly what happens. Wow, look at this, that we have images in the background, that we've been able to actually add a new page at the beginning of the PDF document. And we've actually been able to merge the actual documents as well. So you can see those PDF documents were added as well. And we've actually created linked lists. So for example, I can actually go here and just click on this link when I view the PDF document. And it takes me to that particular individual PDF document that was merged. So I can basically create a table of contents very, very easily here. So isn't that a really cool feature here that you can have a lot of control? So let's see how that's done. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to run exactly the same thing here that we just did, but I'm going to go here and I'm going to use the new debugger, and we actually be able to see here that I've actually created breakpoints here in the create PDF. So let's go and run that same process again. We're going to go to statistics, and we're going to actually build again the PDF documents. We're going to go back to the create PDF, and then I'm going to hit the create button here. But of course, I've got all sorts of debugging going on here, so now we can actually see what's going on. So we've actually stopped here at the beginning of that command button. It's going to actually execute this code here. I'll continue on and just give you the highlights. So at this point, for example, we're actually going to go here. We've created the PDF report, so there's the save as of PDF. And we're going to call a function here called ufmerge, which is going to actually use the merge command within the new PDF document. And you can see here that we're going to instantiate some of those new classes, the multi-line text, the page object, and the document object. After that, what we're going to do here is call methods on those objects. In this case, add content. And then, for example, we're going to import content. So this is where we actually start the merge operation at this point. So this is a new command, import content. And you can do that multiple times for each PDF that you want to import. And then, of course, we can create the links. So we have basically the ability here to populate a new property called link to object that with the actual text that we want to actually add at this point. And now we added it, for example, the watermark. So we can say watermark.image, and then we can actually point to an external file that for the actual image. And we're actually going to create the new merged document. And of course, once we have that in memory, we just call the save operation for to create a PDF. And there we are. Merged PDF document has been created by using those simple classes, and those commands are adjusting those particular properties to what we want. And that's all there is here to the new PDF builder. So let's have a look here at another cool feature, the SMTP client. Basically, a built-in PowerBuilder object allows you to talk directly to an email server. So we have a new built-in object class. It's in the system class. You can see it in the object browser. You can inherit from this. Again, this is something that I always, as a long-term framework designer, always tell my PowerBuilder students, never ever take anything from the system class. Always create an ancestor that you have control over, so that way you can extend the functionality in your applications from ancestors that you have control over. So the nice thing is that this does not rely on any third-party software within PowerBuilder. It's a native object, it's written in C++, and it allows you to go directly to the actual server without using the client, for example, the Outlook client. It supports text or HTML-based email content and attachments, and allows you synchronous or asynchronous interaction with the email server. And it supports proxy servings as well, so you can go through a proxy server on your way to the email server. And you can specify email priority and content encoding as well. So very, very cool features to control this at a low level. So again, the new object class is inheritable, and I strongly recommend that you create an ancestor for that before using it. So let's look at an SMT client demo. So let's run the example application. And we'll go back here to the statistics part of the ribbon bar. And I just wanted to say here that we can we can create a graph, for example. We can do whatever we want. Somewhere in here, we decide that, we want to send an email. So in this part of the ribbon bar, I have that capability to send that information to another user. So I'm going to go here and open up this dialog. So you can see here that we're going to send an email to Chris Pollock. But you notice here I can put in a subject, whole world here from Elevate 2022. This SMTP feature is awesome. All right, so there we have a nice email that I want to send to myself, another email address. So how do I do that? Well, first of all, I have to go to server settings here, and I actually have to specify the actual server itself, the email server, the port, which of course I blurred this out. That's proprietary information. So I'm sending it from my Appian account over. So again, I have some ability here to specify that I am Chris Pollock. And again, these are properties that you can set. We'll see that when we actually see the code running. In this particular advanced version here, I don't have the ability here to do proxy settings. So that's still work in progress. So once that's done, I can hit the send button here. And we should get the ability here to get a confirmation. So the email was sent successfully. So let's see what happens on the receiving end here. So going over here to my Outlook on my working machine here, you can see here that Chris Pollock at my Canadian address has been sent an email here. So it actually came in, whole world from Elevate 2022, and what I just typed in, wow. This SMTP feature, that is awesome. Obviously, typing is not my forte. But you can see it actually came through okay. So it just shows you here that I can actually do this in real time and send an email to anybody directly through the actual email server. So this is really, really nice. So returning back to the 2022 R2 interface, let's do exactly that same thing again, but we're going to run it through the debugger. And you'll notice here that I've actually put some breakpoints here in the actual command button send for the email. So let's do it again and see actually how this works. So now we're going to go and send an email again. Everything is working out great here as far as getting it to actually get ready to go. But when I hit the send button here, now we're going to see what's happening. So you can see here that in the we have the ability here to actually load some information into some strings, which is what we're doing here. We're loading that information from that dialog, getting it ready here to actually run. If we look at the parent here and we look at the instance variables, you can see here that we've actually created a descendant of the email class called an SMTP client. So it's a descendant of the new object class SMT client. And we instantiated here as an instance variable SMT email. So let's actually walk through the code now and have a look at that. So again, here's that particular object. It's already been instantiated. So again, we're going to load the host information here, the port, username, password, etc. into this object class. So I'll just continue on, and that show you that the next thing we want to do is we can actually use certificates. Maybe we need a certificate to be able to actually communicate with the email server for security reasons. So let's continue on at this point. And you can see here now we're actually loading the 2CC blind copy and subject information here into the actual email object. And we can also see, for example, do we want to actually do asynchronous or synchronous? So you notice here, if we have a new method here called send asynchronous, or if we want, we can use the send method, which is just synchronous. So we have a choice here how we want to send the email. And there you go. So we actually did the send command, and away it went. And that's how easy it is to use this new object class. So the library painter has been basically enhanced to do source code control. So the library painter now provides access to source code control functionality right from the library painter. It performs the same source code control actions as you do in the system tree of the IDE. Of course, the bonus here, it allows you to select blocks of objects to be processed by the source code control software. So therefore, multiple actions can be applied to a group of objects. And the great news is that the library painter and the system tree will stay in sync. So when you do an action in the library painter, you'll actually see it immediately reflected in the system tree. I'll show you that in the demo. Okay, so this is a much more efficient way of working than just working one object at a time from the system tree, which we've only been able to do in previous versions of Appian PowerBuilder. So let's look at the library painter and interacting with source code control in the demo application. So here we are back in the PowerBuilder 2022 R2 interface. I'm running Visual SVN server at this point. So what I've done here is I've created a repository called Appian. I've uploaded the sales demo application, and we actually can see the actual objects that you see here on the left-hand side of the tree here, for example, as we drill down. And there's the actual PowerBuilder libraries, like sales demo, for example. PowerBuilder's object source, and you can see it here in the system tree. So I've gone ahead here and I've basically tied this sample application here to the Visual SVN server repository at this point. And therefore you can see the green dots here at this point. So let's go over here to the actual library painter. And we can see here, for example, if we go to the application, we can see the same thing here, the application object, a data window, global function, non-visual objects, etc. here, as we see it here. But of course, notice that we could do basically a control click, or we can do a select click, and that we can do it here. And anything we do here, when we have a 1, 2, or a block of objects, that we can basically get prompted what kind of SVN action do you want to do. If, for example, we're connected to Git, then we'll see the Git options. If we're basically connected to an older source code manager, then we see the older options. But of course, I'm connected to SVN, so you can actually see here, I see the SVN options. So let's say, for example, we modify a window. So I'll just go to the About window here, and we'll put in some new tag information, and we'll basically hit Save. So that there's a change. You can see here in the library painter, we see it as a change. You also see it here in the system tree. So again, we can use the right-hand mouse button here, for example, and we can put a lock on this object, which of course you can't do in the Git system. And we have to give it a reason, of course. So you can see here in this example, we've actually locked the object. So I'd like to thank everybody here for actually watching the PowerBuilder 2022 revision number 2, basically session that I gave you. I hope all that information was of use to you. I hope you enjoy the rest of the Elevate 2022 conference. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, Chris, for giving us a sneak peek of PowerBuilder 2022 R2. So now is the Q&A time, and we've collected questions from the audience during the registration process, and we've hand-selected some of the most common questions that we think would be widely applicable or of interest to the audience, and we're going to go through and answer those questions. So we have a set of questions regarding upgrading to the latest version of PowerBuilder. First question was, do you have to upgrade to PowerBuilder 2022 for Windows 11 compatibility? So the short answer is yes. The long answer is that each particular version of PowerBuilder is going to have its own set of system requirements. And at Appian, we work on testing and resolving issues only according to those system requirements. So if you're not using PowerBuilder 22 and you run across a problem on Windows 11, we would only provide technical support if you're able to reproduce that on a version of Windows that is supported, for example, Windows 10. Another upgrade question. How easy is it to upgrade to PowerBuilder 2022? Well, if you're upgrading from PowerBuilder 10 or newer, that's when Sybase switch to Unicode, then it should be fairly straightforward and minimal work. The only caveat would be that if you're heavily using any discontinued features. So there's a distinction between obsolete and discontinued features. Obsolete are features that are still in PowerBuilder 22, but they're just not being enhanced anymore or supported. Discontinued means those features have been removed from the product. And so if your source code is referencing or making use of a discontinued feature, then it's not going to be able to upgrade or compile successfully. You would have to rewrite those features prior to upgrading. Now, there are some resources to help you with this as you're going through the upgrade process. If you have various questions or run into issues, that wouldn't be the traditional technical support you would get from Appian. That's covering not project issues, but actually the product. So the community is a great resource where you can reach into fellow developers, including Appian MVPs, and Appian staff as well is monitoring the community and tries to help out as much as our resources allow. Another great resource to keep in mind if you're going through an upgrade and it ends up being more daunting than you can handle with community Q&A and our documentation would be to reach out to our consulting partners. We have a network of partners that are small boutique firms really focused on PowerBuilder, deep knowledge, and they do these kind of things all the time. They've run into all these different scenarios, so they would be able to help you out. There was a question about PowerBuilder user interface. How to use other UI technologies with PowerBuilder. Actually, there was several questions related to this, so we kind of summarized it. Some people were asking, how can I do an HTML user interface? How can I build mobile apps? And so on. So the gist of this is that, you guys all love PowerBuilder. You want to be able to use PowerBuilder technology, but you're looking for other user interface besides the native Windows app user interface that is part of the PowerBuilder. So unfortunately, we don't have a great answer for this that is going to make most of you happy. If you're looking to leverage PowerBuilder technology, the only thing you can really leverage is a .NET version of a data store. So basically a non-visual data window. That's about all of PowerBuilder that you could leverage if you want to not stick with the Windows UI. The PowerBuilder runtime is very tightly integrated. The data window, the user interface, it's all part of its framework. Very hard to deliver that in HTML or mobile. And so you have two approaches. If you're developing a new application, you could leverage the .NET data store to create new business logic, and you'd generally want to do that as a REST API so that it's agnostic from the UI, and therefore you could consume it with an HTML user interface, for example, like Angular or Vue, or if you're developing mobile apps, iOS, Android, you could do that with various different mobile app frameworks, and all of those would be sharing the same business logic layer that is REST API. And UI technologies are constantly changing. You really want to develop your business logic layer to not have a dependency on the UI technology if you're going to go embark on this kind of effort, so that then your UI can adapt over time. Now, if you have existing business logic in your app, then you can leverage the PowerScript migrator to do that migration. And you can see on the left-hand side is PowerScript code. On the right-hand side is a C# generated by a PowerScript migrator. And for a Power developer who, let's say you don't have a lot of experience in C#, this looks quite similar. It's pretty readable. So, and why is that? It's because even though the language is C#, the framework, everything, the coding is around the data window. So that's the powerful object that you're all very familiar with. Now, there's a set of questions regarding Power Server. We seem to have quite a bit of interest in Power Server regarding the whole conversion. So the first question regarding that was, can an existing PowerBuilder app be converted to Power Server without reprogramming? So the short answer is no, but it's a lot better answer than if you're trying to change your user interface technology. That's going to be significant work. Power Server is typically small amount of work, and the work is really due to certain differences between client-server and cloud-native architecture. If you look at the actual PowerBuilder features, for example, things that the data window does, or let's say you want menus, toolbars, you might be using PFC framework, you might be using OCXs and OLAs embedded. All of that you can do because Power Server is not HTML. It's a native Windows app using the PowerBuilder runtime DLLs on the client side. So it can do what PowerBuilder client server does as well. So really the code remediation is around difference just in the architecture, because now you have the cloud native architecture. Now, typically most of our customers complete the reprogramming work in several weeks or less, so it's not a heavy amount typically. Another question about Power Server conversion. What are the steps to deploy to the internet or convert with Power Server? So at a high level, the first step is you got to upgrade to PowerBuilder 22. Power Server is really a compiler option and a set of additional tools in the PowerBuilder IDE. So it is dependent on the PowerBuilder version. It's not like a separate product. So you do need to first upgrade to PowerBuilder 22, but once you're on to 22, then adapting your database login, since Power Server's cloud native architecture, you're not directly connecting database. That adaptation typically for most customers is generally a one-day effort. It's not huge. And then you're going to have to remediate any unsupported features or things that behave differently. So we talked about some things are different between client server and cloud native architecture. So we call those unsupported features and discrepancies. And so it really depends on if you made use of that. But in general, every app will be affected to a slight degree. So, we generally budget at least a few days for this task. But depending on how much you use, how large your app is, it could be a few weeks. We generally don't see it taking more than a few weeks. The other thing you might want to look at is if in a particular window you're doing hundreds or thousands of calls to your database in a single window, for example, like in the window open event. If that's triggering hundreds or thousands of calls, because these calls will now be going back and forth over the internet, it takes time from the user's device to get to your server over the internet and come back. So it's not about the amount of data, it's just about constantly having to go back and forth so many times before that task is done. And these calls are synchronous. So they add up 100 milliseconds, 100 milliseconds, and so on. So we do have a feature called Power Server Labels that lets you go into your code and you simply tag the code and you group multiple calls into a single call. So then when PowerServer sees a data window retrieve or a line of embedded SQL, it's not going to make that call. It's just going to wait until gets to the end of the PowerServer label, you blocked off your set of code, and then it'll execute that as a single call. So you're not having to go and rewrite a lot of code. You just need to sit there and tag your code. And then the PowerServer data access is happening in the Web API layer and .NET on the server side. And with Web APIs, if this is not on premise, you're exposing it over the internet, you generally want to add authentication. We provide a number of pre-built templates for very popular scenarios, like let's say you're going to use JWT or OAuth or Azure Active Directory. So by using our pre-built templates, then you don't really need to have deep knowledge of doing this authentication, and you basically need to fill in a few parameters and adjust code just slightly. Your web APIs are doing authentication. So generally, if you use our templates, that's no more than a few days, and it's fairly straightforward if you just read the documentation. Another PowerServer conversion question. So during the conversion process, if something's not working, how do you troubleshoot that? Well, there's a couple tools we provide. The first is the Unsupported Features Analyzer, which will scan all your source code and try to identify any unsupported features. It's not going to be able to capture every single unsupported feature because some things are maybe dynamic or during execution. It's more like a static code analyzer, but it's still going to help you catch a lot of it. And that'll be the first place to start with. So that's the first tool that you could leverage. The second tool is starting in PowerBuilder 22, we've added an integrated PowerServer debugger. In the PowerBuilder IDE, there's going to be a second toolbar for the PowerServer set of tools, and that has a debugger that allows you to debug the actual PowerServer version of your project rather than client server. And therefore, let's say in client server works fine, but in PowerServer it's not, you'd be able to step through that code and see exactly what's going on. In addition to that, we strongly recommend looking at the documentation at docs.appian.com. There's two documentations of big interest, I would think. One is the troubleshooting guide, and the other is the debugging guide. And of course, as you're doing your project and you're lost and something's not working right, for project support, it's great to go on the community and ask your fellow developers. And for troubleshooting any particular error that, let's say, through the community is not getting resolved, and that error is, just one error, not something you would go and engage a partner to do a project for you. Well, there's the option to do premium support tickets. So the difference between standard and premium support is that standard covers defects in our product, whereas premium support helps you with defects in your code. So if you got a configuration issue or an unsupported feature or whatever, will help you to troubleshoot that. Another PowerServer question, what is the current status of the SQL preview event in PowerServer 2022 R2? So in the current PowerServer, the SQL preview event is an unsupported feature. And we had announced previously in last year's Elevate, as well as on the roadmap page on the Appian website, that we do plan to support that. So the good news is things are still on track. There's no change in plans. We expect to have this feature supported in 2022 R2. We're working very diligently to support most or all possible scenarios of how SQL Preview would be used. So we have now a set of questions regarding the product roadmap. What new features can we expect to see in PowerBuilder as a result of the expanded partnership with Text Control? So Text Control is a company that Appian has partnered with to get the rich text edit. So we partnered with them and we've gotten a higher edition of the Text Control object. So now it's the Enterprise Edition. And so what that means is we'll be able in 2022 R2 to support field processing functionality so that you could deploy like form fields with check boxes, drop down boxes, and other form text fields. So that's one thing you'll be able to do. Beyond that, really what we're looking for is our customers to give us suggestions on what you'd like to be able to do that you can't do today in rich text edit. And with the Enterprise Edition, we have the full set of features now. So we should be able to support a lot of different advanced scenarios. So it's just a matter of understanding what is it that a lot of customers want to do. So the best thing you can do if you're looking for something in the rich text edit that is not there today is send an email to product@appian.com. That's monitored by our product management team, and they will work to then understand your request and see if we can prioritize that in our roadmap. Another roadmap question: will the scaling, resizing UI issues of PowerBuilder be resolved? So it's already possible to leverage the resize event for dynamically scaling the PowerBuilder user interface to fit different, screen sizes and resolutions. And actually, Kevin Ridley's done a session on this. He did a first part of this at last year's Elevate, and the recording is available if you go to elevate.appian.com. And then Kevin is doing a second part of that, which talks about resizing the data window specifically, whereas the previous one focused more on the general, windows and other controls. So these two parts together would give you a complete approach to do that. But we do plan on natively resolving this in the next major version. So not in 22R2, a revision is not a major version, a revision is a minor version, but in the next major version, we do plan on solving it. So if you can't wait and you want to address it sooner, definitely recommend taking a look at Kevin's approach. Another roadmap question: will PowerBuilder PowerServer support other operating systems, such as Mac OS? So I'm sorry, we don't have any plans for that. PowerServer is really part of the PowerBuilder technology. The PowerBuilder technology on the client side has a very strong and tight dependency on the Windows operating system. So this would be just like a completely different product. We don't have plans for that. So sorry about that. But there is a workaround. Maybe not the best workaround, but if you don't have a choice and you really need to have users on a Mac or something access your app, you'd be able to do that through, for example, Windows VDI. You could set up a Citrix or remote desktop server that has your PowerBuilder app, and the Mac OS users would use remote desktop to connect to that server and use your application. Another roadmap question: what is the long-term plan for PowerBuilder client server? So we're very committed to client server. We talk about a lot of things because we need to talk about what's new and how things are changing. But client server is bread and butter for PowerBuilder. There's a lot of huge apps out there. And on top of that, 50.7% of our customers are developing more new apps today with PowerBuilder. So that's a ton of applications that we have responsibility for to support that. So client server is not going anywhere. Now, in terms of long-term though, our policy is to only publicly communicate detailed features about short-term, midterm, because the further you go out, the more likely plans will need to be adjusted. And so it really doesn't make sense to be going into that much detail. However, I can share with you that regardless what the detailed features or changes are going to be long-term for client server, one general area that we're going to be focusing on is the long-term viability of the client server apps you develop with PowerBuilder that you need to maintain. So long-term viability are things like making sure it's compatible, right? Windows 11 comes out, we need to support that. Dealing with security issues, making sure bugs and stability and other issues are resolved so that your apps run reliably for your business, improving usability for the business users who are consuming your application. So these are all things around the viability, and that's something we take very, very seriously for the long term. So those are a few questions we've answered. If you have more questions and like to ask Appian or also your fellow colleagues and just pick each other's brains, a great place to do that is on community.appian.com. I've said that several times, but really like to see more of you. We're also on social media, and make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel because there's a lot of great educational videos that keep being added time to time. So just wanted to briefly outline, that concludes our keynote. We're going to have a 1-hour break now. If you'd like, you can join the chat cafe. And during the chat cafe, that 1 hour, you could chat with Appian. That's a great way to directly talk with us and get your questions answered real time. And after the 1 hour break, and Chat Cafe will be concluding at the end of that 1 hour break, then we start our tech session. So to join the Chat Cafe, if you want to do that, or join any of the tech sessions, go to elevate.appian.com and scroll down to the live streaming center on that homepage and just click the Explore Live Streaming Center button on the right-hand side. And from there, you'll see the times of the different tech sessions, and you can click the link to go into that session and watch it. So hope you're enjoying Elevate 22, and hope the rest of your day today and tomorrow will be a great one. Thank you.